And here we go. Okay, everybody. So again, today we're going to be acting as the TS08, who are the ones in charge of managing freight orders in both issuing missions and receiving missions for STO scenarios. And we would also be talking about TS02s if this were a UNOE scenario, so we're receiving goods from a vendor. But in this specific case, since we've covered several times the UNOE scenarios, we're going to be focusing more on the ones for intermission and particularly an FCA scenario. So we're going to be acting as TS08s for issuing plants and receiving plants. And what does that mean? That we'll be logging into TM and we'll be seeing how TM reacts when we log in as one user or another, and how we only see the freight orders that are assigned to us, whether we are in the issuing plant or the receiving plant. Also, today we're going to be adding something new, which is assigning a UN entity as a carrier, which we haven't done so far. We always added a freight forwarder as a carrier. In this case, we're going to be testing and adding the UN as the UN entity as a carrier for the goods. So basically, even though it's maybe not realistic entirely for an FCA scenario to share transportation between the issuing plant and the receiving plant with a UN vehicle, we're going to be doing that just so you see how that works. And of course, eventually, since we're using a UN vehicle, we're not going to be assigning a freight PO, as we don't have to go through the solicitation process. But still, we'll assign the carrier so that we can track every stage, every FO. Okay, so quick review before we get started. Again, any questions you may have, just use the chat or unmute yourself, and we'll see if we can answer your question during the session. So as a quick review, we're taking a look at the outbound delivery, and we did this during yesterday's session, yesterday, Wednesday, where we were doing planning for the freight units that were generated from this outbound delivery document. And before we did any of that, what we wanted to make sure of is that the items were packaged correctly. Okay, and to do that, we went into the outbound delivery document. We ensured that the items showed as packaged, but more importantly, we focused on this TM status tab. And we, again, reviewed how we were supposed to understand if the items were correctly packed and if they were displayed in TM. Okay, so remember, the packing view button has to be active for you to understand that the packaging has transferred to TM and the items were correctly packed. If you click on the packing view, you will see how the structure changes a bit here, and the packaging is the one that is ruling the items, so we can fold all the packaging. So every package material that we've added for the materials will lead the, let's say, the display structure under packing items. To go back to your other view, just click on item view. Okay, so we're just taking a look at the packing view here. We're seeing that there are items inside each package. There's a total of 3 handling units, 3 package materials that we inserted our materials into. So we see that so far everything looks good, and then we would go into TM and see if the items were packed before we did the planning, right? So this was the outbound delivery. We see that everything is working fine. We have our packing view available, and then we go into TM, and now we're the TS08 of the issuing plant, or we could be, in this case, the TS07. Yesterday, we also checked as TS07s first before planning. We went to the overview transportation requirements, and we took a look at how to see right from our results page. Again, here, I'm using the outbound delivery here as my search. I clicked on apply, I get my results at the bottom, and we reviewed that if you go to the open settings dialog, you could actually select from the hidden columns the packaging status. Okay, the packing status here, and we learned that if we add that to the displayed columns, we clicked on OK, we would understand if our items were completely processed, which means that they have been packed in ECC, and basically we could move on and start our planning. So that's exactly what we did. We went into the cockpit. We did it directly from here. We selected our line, went to the cockpit here, or remember, you can do so through planning. We also checked again in the transportation cockpit that these were correctly packed. Actually, if we click on our DTR, we can also see that the packaging was done correctly if we see the items that are being transported. So again, remember that if you are the issuing plant in an FCA scenario, you're in charge of planning the entire transportation route for the freight unit. So that's why you have a display of all the materials that are being transported. Okay, you have them here as well under the items section. We took a look at that. We also saw that if we select some of these lines, we had the information on the handling units. And if we unfold, select the product, we also have the information details linked to each one of these materials, and even the STO that is linked to it, the product ID, the goods value for each individual item here. So we understood that all our handling units appeared and that the materials were properly packaged in TM, but we also realized that after our planning, we only saw one freight order. Okay, and we actually had 3 when we planned, and we had to understand why that was the case, right? Remember, it's an FCA scenario, so you are, as the TS07 for an FCA intermission scenario, you are responsible for planning the entire transportation route for this freight unit, which is 1785. But then once you plan, you're only going to see the freight orders that you're responsible for, because in terms of managing freight orders, managing stages, the issuing plant and the receiving plant share responsibility, okay? And where does the responsibility end and begin in an FCA scenario? Well, it's the handover location. So we're only going to be responsible for the stage from source location to the handover location, and from handover location all the way to the destination location. It's the receiving plant who will be managing the FOs. So basically, all we will have access to is one of these FOs. If we went to the freight unit, which we saw that as well, we could see all the stages. If we went to our stages tab, as we have here, we see that we had stage 1, 2, and 3. So we have a view of all the stages that we planned for. We understand what stages there are and what locations we're going to, what are our handover locations, the ports that we're going to as well. But if we scrolled all the way to the right, we realize that we only have access to one of the freight orders. The others are blank. Okay, we don't have access to them from here. We also see that the carrier hasn't been assigned so far. So as TS08s, it's our responsibility to do that first. But we're only going to do that for our freight order, the one we're responsible for as issuing plant. Okay, so we're only going to be assigning the carrier here for this freight order, and then we'll log in as the receiving plant TS08 and do that for the other 2 freight orders that are blank here. Okay, so basically that's just a quick review of what we saw yesterday. We can go back to our initial page. So let's go back to our ERP Logistic Integration tab. And now if we were logging in as TS08 from the issuing plant, we would go to Freight Order Management and now take a look at the freight orders that need to be assigned a carrier. Okay, and usually we assign the carrier in a freight PO because we've always been talking about UNOA scenarios, right? So goods being delivered by a vendor, where we would assign either a some sort of carrier, right? A freight forwarder. We would do it the following way. So we come to our Freight Order Management tab, and then again, what we would do, or the best way to search for the freight orders that we're responsible for, is either adding our freight order number if we know it, or basically we go to Change Query, and we see from the options that are displayed all the way at the bottom, we have a section for STO, PO, or ECC inbound or outbound delivery. So right here, I'm adding my outbound delivery, which is still marked here. I'm making sure it's the correct one. And you would click on apply and see the results. Okay, the results should only be one freight order. Even though there are 3, we only see the one we're responsible for. Okay, we also can see that we have the information on our source location description here, UNIMID, and destination location description, which is Mombasa Port, or the address, which is Mombasa in this case. Okay, so So far, there's nothing else to add here or nothing new to mention. What we would do in this case is now that we have to assign the carrier, let's say in this case, since it's an intermission transfer and we're using a UN vehicle, what we want to do is assign that UN vehicle to this freight order. The process to do so is exactly the same way we do when we were assigning a carrier. We can select the freight order here and simply go to subcontracting. We would select assign carrier and SRM freight PO, but now instead of populating the freight purchase order field, all we have to populate is the carrier field. Okay, before I do that, remember that you can do this in several ways. You can do it here, right from the results page, or you can access your freight order. And once the freight order displays, you have several ways of assigning a carrier. You can go to Business Partner, and on the Business Partner tab, you can click on Edit. And here where it says Carrier, you can simply select it from the matchbox. And again, you're in the same, pretty much the same view that you had from the results page we were looking at before. We would click on Contains just because it's easier and write the information on our business partner here. Okay, we can do it like that, or basically we can go to subcontracting, which is a tab that is also available here, and select the carrier from the field of the carrier and do the same. Click on the matchbox and make a selection from the business partner. If you don't know the business partner ID exactly, you can always search by name or last name, which any wording that is similar to anything that is in the master data NTM should display here. Okay, so these are several ways of doing the same thing, of assigning a carrier. So let's click out of this screen, go back to our results page here and see that we have our freight order, and let's assign a carrier. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the fact that now we have a list of BPs for UN entities, so we can assign a UN entity as a carrier. And if we click on subcontracting and we assign a carrier here, we can click on the matchbox and search for the mission, let's say, or entity that we want to assign as a carrier. Now, I don't know how it looks in production. Okay, remember, this is the training environment, but basically, if in this case, what we're looking at is we want to add a Unimid, I believe it was, right? Let's just make sure that's the case. Yes, source location is Unimid, so let's assign Unimid as a carrier. Let's go here and see if we can find Unimid as a carrier. If not, I'll just add the BP directly. And we should be able to find any carriers that are linked to Unimid in the results page here. So we have several. Okay, basically we have several options to select from that are linked to different sections. Okay, warehouse, supercamp, base, regional service. So basically we can select any of these. Now I'm not sure if all of these work or if any of these work. Okay, right now I'm just going to be testing and see which one can work. So maybe I can assign a carrier that makes no sense. Maybe I'm assigning UNAMA to Unimid, but this is just to move on. But before I do that, I want to test and see if any of these work, right? So we have an Excel that I don't know if it has been shared with you guys that has basically a list of carrier numbers for the entities themselves, right? So if we were looking for Unimid in this case, we could select one here, which is Unimid. We should be able to just write this information, which is C-SD10, and copy it into our, let's say, business partner here. And we should be able to see, so let's get rid of this Unimid search here, and let's put contains, and let's see if we have any information linked to this BP in the training environment. So when I click on search, I should have a result here. In this case, I'm not seeing anything. So let's see if I just remove the C, click on search, and again, nothing here. So I'm just really testing this to see which one is actually available on the training environment. So in this case, I should be able to search for the Unimid as entity, and that should show me the carrier itself here, but it's not in this case, okay? So another thing we can do is also right from here, just paste it. And if anything is linked to this BP, it should appear below and telling me, do you mean Unimid? And then I will just click on yes. So let me try another one. I'm just going to try a couple of them to see which one shows up automatically in the system. So it seems like some of these don't. I'm going to see if I'm going to test 2 more, and if they don't work, I'm going to go to the one I know that does work. Okay, so basically this one doesn't. We can probably even search if we want to here by first name, if we want to say here Unimid, and test one of the ones that appeared before. Maybe I want to use the RNI unit, or maybe I want to use regional service. I don't know. I could use any of these and see if that works, but it probably will tell me that it doesn't exist. So it's not a valid carrier. So let me use one that I know that does work, even though it won't match my entity, but I know it works because I've tested this one before and I've had no issues with it. So if I paste this one here, see, we have a value, okay? And so you guys understand which one this is. If I go to the matchbox here and paste my business partner, click on search, it's the one for UNAMA. So in the training environment, it seems like this BP for UNAMA does work. So I could simply select it. Now imagine this one is for Unimid, right? And we have the carrier. So basically now we would be assigning a UN entity as a carrier. I would click on OK, and that should automatically change my carrier from dummy to whoever is transporting it, whether it's Unimid, UNAMA, ONMIS, or any other entity. Okay, remember, if it doesn't show automatically, you just click on refresh and the carrier description should change, and here you go. So the carrier is UNAMA. Okay, so again, if you guys have just joined the session, we're looking at assigning UN entities as carriers. Okay, we couldn't find one for Unimid using the actual carrier number, the BP number, but we could use UNAMA and that works, and that's why we're using this one here. Let me take a look at the chat because I do see something here. Gaston, okay, kindly share the Excel document with BPs again because MS Teams attached said it wasn't available anymore. Okay, well, Gaston, I could share it with you, but as you've seen, it doesn't seem to have the accurate information. Maybe if it's not available anymore, it's probably because we're making changes to it and assigning different BPs, because if you can see here, there's a ton of BPs that I can't find. Okay, I've searched for 4 or 5 of them. I can search for a couple more. Like for example, now I'm adding Uniogbis here and clicking on search, and I don't get any results. So basically, I think that's probably why it's been removed. Okay, I can search for MONUSCO, which I'm adding here too, but they may have changed. Well, MONUSCO is actually there, so that's good. So MONUSCO and UNAMA seem to work. MINUSCA, I'm checking MINUSCA now and see. So out of MINUSCA is there too. Okay, so some of them are there, others are not, and I think that's why the Excel was probably removed. So ECLAC is there too. Okay, so basically some are there, but the ones that I need for this demo are not. So Unimid is definitely not there. Okay, this one for Colombia is not there either. And I'm just going to check one more for UNFICIP to see if that works. So they may change these BPs. So once they do and we get a final version of this document, I'll share this with all of you guys. Okay, but basically now, I know I couldn't find Unimid, so I'm just going to use UNAMA as a carrier here. Okay, Gaston. So I think our other is Mombasa. The destination location is Mombasa, so I don't think I can have a carrier for that one too, but I'll check. Okay, so basically the first thing we did here is assign the UN entity as a carrier. Okay, we were looking for Unimid, we couldn't find it, so we added UNAMA. But basically what does this mean is that now I can track the transportation even using a UN vehicle. Okay, because we had a lot of these questions during the training that if we use the UN vehicle, should we still track shipments? And the answer is yes, of course. And the way to do it is assigning the entity as a carrier, just like we did now. Okay, so basically we've only assigned one carrier to one freight order. So we would now have to log in as the receiving mission and do that for that one as well. Okay, so let me assign it as the receiving mission. Okay, and then I'll go back to the freight orders and start editing the locations, dates, and charges. Now, remember, this freight order is not the main carriage, right? This one is the one from source location, which is from the actual entity, and the destination is Mombasa Port. So basically, we're not going to be editing this stage nonetheless, so we can always exit this and not worry about this freight order. If we want to make any changes to locations, we'll do so on the main carriage freight order, which belongs to the receiving mission. So let's exit this screen. And let me log in now as the receiving mission. Okay, so I can do that. And I'm going to log in as the receiving mission here. And I'm going to search for my outbound delivery number just the same way I just did, but this time as the receiving mission TS08. Okay, so I'm going to my freight order management. I'm clicking on overview freight orders, and I'm going to search for my outbound now. Okay, so remember, you can't see it here. Well, the ECC delivery is at the bottom, so we can use this without the need to go to the change query. Okay, I have my accurate number here. I click on apply just to make sure these are actually linked to it, and yes. Okay, again, these are also still under dummy carrier, so we still need to assign. And the final destination is actually MONUSCO. So for the receiving plant, we're actually going to be able to assign the accurate BP. Okay, so we're going to be assigning MONUSCO, the entity, as the carrier for these two freight orders. Okay, remember, you can do this simultaneously or individually. Simultaneously, you simply select them both. Go to subcontracting, and we assign a carrier. Okay, just like we did before. In this case, we can directly add MONUSCO here. So if I'm adding MONUSCO here, and I do have master data, it will show here below. As you see, we have the carrier for MONUSCO. Okay, if you guys want to see it a little better, we can go to the matchbox here and add the MONUSCO option, BP, and here we go, carrier MONUSCO. So we're selecting that, clicking on OK, and now MONUSCO will be assigned as the carrier for these two freight orders. Okay, we refresh. We have now carrier MONUSCO. So for the last two stages, we have the accurate carrier. We have the BP, it's in the master data in the system, and we were actually able to assign MONUSCO UN vehicles as the carrier for these two freight orders. Okay, very good. So which one would be the main carriage out of these two? All we would have to look at is source location, destination location, and we're looking at airport to airport or port to port, which in this case is the one ending in 901 from Mombasa Port to Dar es Salaam Port. Okay, our last leg would be Dar es Salaam Port to MONUSCO Logistic Base. So we've done our first part of the process, which is the assigning the carrier. The second part, if you guys remember, is now editing the freight orders. If, let's say, we have now different locations. Okay, now the route that we planned for is different, and we want to make sure that we're assigning the correct one. We can basically just go to the freight order, the one that is linked to the main carriage, and make changes there. Okay, so in this case, we have our stage here. We are the TS08 of the receiving plant, so it's our responsibility to change any locations or dates. Okay, so we click on edit, basically, and here we would make changes to either the source location or destination location. So maybe we are going from Mombasa Port, but we're changing the destination port. And again, we would simply search for a new location or a location description. Best way is always to go with contains and adding here a new location. Now, if you guys are listening and paying attention, which would be a other option for me to select from? Let's have you guys intervene a little bit. So if I wanted to change Dar es Salaam Port for any other destination location from Mombasa, which would be a good option if I wanted to search for a different location? Okay, I'll wait for anybody to write in the chat maybe another option for a location if we wanted to switch and say, you know what, instead of Dar es Salaam, we could go somewhere else. And we'll make that change. Okay, while I wait, I'm just going to write here port, Click on search and see the options that I get. And I'm waiting to see if anyone is willing to tell me another location that may be better or also typically used. Okay, if I just write port, I have tons of different options. No one is intervening in the chat. So I see that when it comes to this, no one wants to give me a hand. But if you guys have questions in the meantime, also write them in the chat. So basically you see here, if you just write port under locations, you'll have all possible port options and locations. What you would have to do is, of course, search for the one that is the actual course that you're taking. So if there's anyone in MONUSCO that usually is involved in the transportation for goods from one mission to another, one entity to another, what would be another port that you would want to select here in this case? If instead of using Dar es Salaam port as a destination location, we're going from Mombasa to any other port that would be typically used, which one would be a better option or a different option? Come on, somebody. Okay, well, if I don't get anyone, what I'm going to do is look for it myself, since I don't know it by heart either. So I think I just clicked on cancel here before I make any changes. So I want to make sure that the destination location address is this one. I want to see if we have any other option here. So we're looking at Mombasa, Dar es Salaam, and the destination location, MONUSCO Logistic Base. Okay, so let's see what options I can get here. I'm still keeping an eye on the chat if anyone is willing to give me another location for the destination port. Instead of Dar es Salaam, probably give me another one. Okay, this would be very helpful. If not, I'm just going to come up with any change, which of course the system is probably going to tell me that I'm not selecting the right one. Okay, so I see nobody's going to volunteer for that. There you go. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Fanus. Thank you, Gaston. I was wondering where everybody went. Probably having coffee or breakfast. Okay, so there we go. We have two ports now. We have Luanda port and Limassol port. This could be good options. All right, so let's see. Let's write in the location if I have Limassol port. If I write it like this, if I get any, maybe if I just write Sol, or if it doesn't, there you go. So we have the option. Okay, so again, if something doesn't come up immediately with one wording or another, you guys can always play around with the wording. So we do have Limassol port that we can select. Very good. We also, let's see if we have Luanda. And we do. Actually, it seems like we have two of these. We have airports and ports. Okay, so in this case, we have two options to select from. Of course, if you select airport, you're definitely going to have a conflict in the change of locations. So maybe the port is also an option here. And we saw that for Limassol, we had actually only one option, which is just a port as well here too. Okay, so no airport in this case. Very good. So let me see. Let me use Luanda port just because I had two options and this could cause some conflict. So I'm going to use the Luanda port instead. And I'm making the change here. Basically, click on enter and see if when I save this change. So now basically what I'm telling it is it's going from source Mombasa to Luanda. And I'm saving and I'm seeing to see if there's any conflict, and it doesn't seem like there is. It says data saved successfully, charge calculation completed. So the change was done. It looks like it was done accurately. Since we didn't change the source, we're not affecting the first freight order, the one from the issuing plant. So basically the source location handover is still the same. What should have changed now is from my destination location in the main carriage to my destination location in the on carriage. Let's see if that actually happened. So I'm saving. It says saving is not required. All right, very good. So I can go back to my document flow and I would have only my freight order here. So basically I can just close this. I can refresh now and see if the changes have been here. Very good. They've been performed here. Okay, so now I have my main carriage shows my source location, Luanda port, and my destination, there you go, Luanda. And my last one, if you see, both of them have changed. I have, if I scroll a bit more to the left, I have from my main carriage, the one that I actually changed, source location Mombasa to Luanda, and automatically my last one here, 903, has changed from Luanda to MONUSCO Logistic Base. So there's been no conflict. The change occurred fine, and now I wouldn't have to cancel the freight orders, cancel the freight unit, and replan again and go back to the TS07 and go through the planning again. Basically, my change in my main carriage has automatically updated my on carriage, and I don't have to change my pre-carriage FOs because the source, the handover location is still the same one. Okay, very good. If we changed probably our source location, it would have automatically changed my first stage from the issuing plant as well without a conflict. Okay, usually conflicts occur when you have a vendor delivered stage and it doesn't match with the new changes you made in the freight order. So here we go. We have our first change and that's perfect. Okay, we also have, maybe if we go back to our freight order, if we wanted to complicate things a bit more, we could change dates too. Remember that to change dates, you would still go to the stages under your freight order, the same thing, edit. And now that we've changed from Mombasa to Luanda, maybe we can change now the dates of maybe not departure. Departure will still be the same, but maybe now our arrival date can be different. I'm just thinking maybe it takes longer or shorter. I'm not 100% sure, as I don't do these things day-to-day basis. But I'm just going to change it just for the heck of it to see what happens. Okay, so 21. It's going to take a day, let's say, to get there for any other issue that could have occurred. And now I've changed the date here. Remember, I can also change the time and say it's going to get there at 8:30. And I can save and see if that makes any change or conflict. So there is a time conflict in the freight order, probably for the last stage. Okay, so let's see if I can manage that. So if it tells me to save and it says, okay, save not required, let me go now to my last leg here, because here's where we have our conflict, and now change this one to see if we can match. Okay, we have our Luanda port to MONUSCO Logistic Base. We click on edit, and now what we'll do is the planned departure here is the conflict. So we can say that, let's say it leaves on the 21st, so we can avoid that conflict. And now we're going to add the time. Let's just add 9 o'clock in this case. Okay, let's add that time and see the actual departure date is 21 and the arrival date is 23rd. Okay, maybe we can change that too. Let's say the arrival date will be the 21st. Okay, same thing. And let's say that we will arrive at, I don't know how much time it's going to take. So anything I add here will be quite unrealistic, but I'm just saying that just for the sake of it and see how the system reacts to it. And if I save this, the change was done well. Okay, so basically changing the date, since I changed the date and there was a conflict, I basically went to my last freight order and I made a change there for the dates to match. Okay, so if basically the cargo is arriving in Luanda port on the 21st, it can't depart Luanda port on the 20th. So I have to come to this stage and edit and make the change here on the date and times as well. Okay, so that has been changed. I can save. It seems that everything is fine. And if I go back to my main screen here and I refresh, I will have the changes here as well. Okay, so here we go. We have Mombasa to Luanda on the 20th, Luanda to MONUSCO on the 21st, and the time is also changed here. Okay, to the dates are, see, last activity dates are here represented well. Okay, this is the one that is going to show me my last activity. So the system is still going to keep track of my first activity, which is my initial planned data. Okay, because remember, we always have a planned time and a planned date, and then we have our actuals, and we're now adding our actuals, just like we add our actual charges, we're adding our actual routes and our actual dates, and this will show up under our last activity here. First activity will give us the initial plan, and last activity is the actual plan. Okay, so we have the change. It's made there. We see that everything else is still fine. It's in process, ready for transportation execution. So everything looks good so far from here. Okay, so no problems there. Nobody else has added anything in the chat. Again, Fanus and Gaston, thank you for providing ports for me. Okay, I wasn't sure how much longer I was going to have to wait, but see, we made the changes and everything is working fine. So what else is left? We've changed, we've assigned the carrier, we've changed the locations, we've changed the dates, and now we have one more thing to do, right? Which would be the actual charges. Now, the way it works, if we're using a UN vehicle to transport the goods, I know we're not going to get any actual charges from a carrier because we're not going through the solicitation process in this case. So how do we track the actual cost of these freight orders? Maybe that's something you guys can also help me with in the chat if you want to tell me how this would be done or how it's done normally nowadays. So if you have a UN vehicle transporting the goods and now you want to actually set the actual charges for this specific stage, how is that done? How do we have the actual charges? Is that done at a later stage? At what point do we know what it's going to cost us to do it? Do we even add these actual charges? Because remember, we're going to have only estimates right now for the goods that we're transporting. Maybe we just keep it as estimates. This is something that I'll give you guys another minute or two to see if you want to add it in the chat, how you guys normally do this, right? So if I'm adding my actual charges for UN transported goods, so the entity is responsible for the transportation of goods, we're not soliciting for freight cost, how do I establish my actual cost? When would I know this? At what point during transportation? Or are we only sticking to our estimated cost here? Okay, because we should basically have an estimated charge already based on the gross volume calculation. So at the end, okay, so at the end to me means that means after proof of delivery is confirmed, we have received the goods and now we know the actual charges. You guys can speak up if you want to as well. Okay. So once we get the proof of delivery document, we have the actual charges and then we would be able to update them. Okay, so if that's the case, remember, if you submit your proof of delivery document, you close all freight orders. So basically, before you submit the event for proof of delivery, you'd have to go into each individual freight order and add the actual charges based on the last document, which is probably the proof of delivery document where the actual charge is stated, if that's what I'm understanding. You would come to all the freight orders, add the actual charge for each one of them, let's say $100 for each one of these. Okay, we have another $25 for this one. Again, I'm just basically adding anything here, and $85 for each one of these. See, since it's been packaged, I'm adding the actual charge per gross volume per each item. And once I add it, we see our total here, which is calculating it to $105,000. So I believe maybe the transportation for things like, let's see what goods we're transporting again, because if we select our package here, I don't know if that will identify seeing unless we add our items line here. So I don't need my change document, so maybe I can change that too. Remember, I showed you guys this yesterday. We can play around with what we have displayed. So if I don't want to see my change documents here, right? Let's say I wanna, that is useless to me, so I don't want that, and I don't want communication history, but what I do want is to see my items, right? And I want to maybe put this in another stack. Okay, so I can add them to my documents. Here you go. Now I have an items section and a document reference section. So now I can always cross-reference what is being transported. Okay, so let's go to, I was in charges. Okay, let's go back to that. I was adding my actual charges. I have my items, so now I know exactly what I'm transporting here. I see that it's a heater, 2 heaters, and an oil filter, and that's going to cost me $105,000. So again, quite unrealistic, I suppose, but that's how you understand, and that's how you would manage your freight order screens here. So you have your items at the bottom, you know what you're transporting, you know what it's costing you. Okay, the actual charge. So maybe if we're adding, again, this calculation is per rate, which is multiplying by the gross volume. So basically, maybe the rate is quite different. So maybe we have $20 here instead. Okay, and that'll change my actual price here. Maybe it's instead of $25, we can add $10 here. That will modify our total as well. Okay, you can also avoid and ignore the calculation by clicking on this checkbox here, ignore calculation rule. And when you do that, what you're doing is adding the total cost. All right, so if you don't want to add the rate amount, which is what you're doing here by adding $20 and you want to add the total of the cost, you simply ignore the calculation and you see the total is changing. And if I do that for each one of these, the total is going to change every time. And it will basically reflect the sum of what I'm adding here, 85 plus 10 plus 20. So it's going to cost me $115 because I'm adding here, what I'm adding is the total cost of the transportation of these goods for this specific stage. Okay, so you can do it several ways. Either you're calculating the rate if you remove the calculation ignoration, or you're, see, which changes the price drastically, or basically you're adding the total cost of the transportation of goods by clicking on the ignore calculation here. Okay, so that's how that works. You should have an estimated line. Okay, remember that. We should have here present an estimated charge already. So what's useful in this particular case when we're adding the actual cost is that we can cross-reference what we estimated it was going to cost us versus what it's actually costing us, and we can see this in this screen. The actual calculation that would have shown up here initially would have been the one based on the estimated charge. So we could have had that there already. And then when we add our actuals, that'll change it here to our actual cost. Okay, so we can have there a cross-reference between what was estimated and what it's actually costing there as well. Okay, so that's where we would add our actual charges. And according to what Fanos is telling me in the chat, and thank you, Fanos, for giving me that information, you would find out at the end, right? With the proof of delivery document, you have the actual cost. So remember, you don't submit the event of proof of delivery until you have actually added the correct actual cost for each freight order. And once that's done, you simply click on save, and that will keep the charges here under your total amount in local currency. Okay. Basically, you have also total amount in document currency and rounded total amount, but basically it's all the same. Okay, you can also change the currency as well. And basically that's it for this part of the section. So we assigned the carriers, we changed the locations, we changed the dates, and now we added the actual cost for only one freight order. Remember, we only did it for the one ending in 901. If I close this and I go to 903, we're not going to have any calculations there, or we shouldn't have any calculations there, right? So if I go to charges and I see the items that are being transported, we don't have any charges there because, of course, we're only submitting the actuals and estimates per stage. So we're calculating this based on the stage, what it's going to cost us per stage to transport the goods based on the gross volume. Remember, the calculation rate is this one here. Okay. So it's basing the calculation on the gross volume of the goods we're transporting by cubic meter and the location from A to B or B to C or C to D, wherever it is that we're at. Okay, so we'd add our calculation here as well. And here we can add 20 US dollars. Here I'm going to add 14 US dollars. Again, I know I'm adding here nonsense, but basically we're just displaying this. Okay, and let's see if I'm missing any other goods. We do. We're missing the last packaged item here. And the last one we're going to add $18 US. And this time around, what I'm going to do is the ignore calculation, because let's say it's going to cost us a lot less to go from the port in Luanda to the basic to the final destination, which was MONUSCO. And we have here, it's only going to cost us 52 for the last portion. And we save, and we're good to go. So we have already updated the charges for the last two legs. So the TS08 in the receiving mission has done his or her job perfectly, has set the charges, have made the changes, and now we're pretty much done in terms of the tasks of a TS08. Okay, now we would go back now to the TS07, and they would be the ones responsible for submitting events. Now, since there is no carrier assigned, we have no freight forwarder that we have solicited. Let's say we haven't raised the shopping cart for freight. We don't have any freight forwarder involved. It is the responsibility of the TS07 to submit events in TM. And that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. Okay, we're going to log in as TS07, and we're going to be submitting events for these freight orders, the ones that we just added the actual charges for. Okay, so any other question? Now we're almost at 10 minutes to the end of the session. Now it's a good time to maybe ask some questions or maybe test the system a bit and see how it reacts. Okay, so I'm just going to close this screen now. I'm going back to my results page here. And while I wait for someone to ask a question, I'm just going to play around with my open settings dialog to see if I can maybe see the actual cost. Maybe it's a hidden column and I can add that too. So I'm giving you guys maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes to add some questions if you have any. Okay, so now it's time to ask the questions, guys. Let's see, I'm looking to see if I have maybe a hidden column here for actual cost or estimated cost or anything similar. Okay, I do have gross duration, net amount in document currency. Let's see, I don't think that's what I'm looking for, but I'm going to add it there anyway. And what else? Unplanned status, weight, loading volume. So basically, I don't have an option to see my my cost here in the results page. And let me see in the displayed columns. Maybe it's there and I haven't seen it. In the meantime, I'm waiting for any questions. Now is the time to test the system, ask me anything, maybe something you'd like to see, something that's not clear. Here we go, charge calculation status. I'm going to look at that one. And created by invoicing status. Okay, so I think I have enough info there. Let's see, I'm clicking on OK. And I have the net amount in document currency. So there you go. So net amount in document currency, which is the one I had in unavailable or actually available columns but not displayed, is actually what's showing me the actual cost that I entered. So I have a way of displaying that directly in the results page here, because that's exactly the amount that I added manually. So I'm seeing what each stage is costing me here for transportation. Okay, basically one stage is costing me quite a lot of money and the other one is just costing me pennies. Okay, but that's very interesting. So we can see with the net amount in document currency, okay, which if I click on the freight order here, it's showing me, I think under charges, it said total amount in document currency. So I think it's taking it from here. Total amount in document currency is the one that's showing me here, the net amount in document currency. So here it is, okay? And let me scroll to the right because I saw we also have total distance for the transportation stage. And if I keep going, I have the gross weight. Okay, and what else do I have? I know there was one more calculation. Charge calculation status. Okay, it just says calculated. Okay, I think this happens, or this status changes once I have added the actual calculation. It changes to calculated. I'm not sure what it is before I calculate, but it also shows me when this was changed and what time and by who, which is very good. But I think this was the most useful thing, is this net amount in document currency. Okay, and to get that column, what I did is I went to my display here and I went to my hidden columns and I looked for the net amount in document currency, which was actually here around the letter N. And I selected it, put it in my displayed columns, and now I'm able to see what it's costing me per stage right here from the results page. Okay, so that's actually pretty good. Okay, so that's just another thing that we probably didn't know, and it's very useful. We can now, I think, since no one's asking questions, what I'm going to do just basically just to close all the entire process is I'm going to log back in as the issuing plant TS08. And this time I'm going to set the actual charges for the first stage, right? The pre-carriage. So I'm selecting the login for, okay, it says I'm logged in here already. I don't want to kick anybody out. And let's see what that looks like. We go to freight order management, overview freight orders. Okay, we have our, I think this is our DTR document. Okay, remember to make sure that it's the correct outbound delivery document. You can always scroll to the right, cross-reference with your STO. If you don't have that information there, you can also see the ECC delivery number is 4209, which is the one that I'm actually looking at. And we can select it and set our status. You see, there's also a bunch of different options that you can see. Set status, calculate charges. Let's see if I just calculate charges from here directly. Calculation complete. Okay, but I don't think I have done anything there. Let's see what the calculation status is. It says charge calculation calculated. Okay, let's take a look at the document itself and let's see what that looks like in the charges tab. So I have my charges tab here. Remember, we're not changing any locations here because basically from source to handover hasn't changed. It's still fine. The dates are still fine. And let's see what the charges looks like. It said calculated. Okay, so I don't think it calculated anything, but let's take a look anyway. Okay, I'm going to edit and I'm going to see if we have any actual charges here. So I played around with the columns before. So actual charge, estimated charge. This is the unit of measure. Let's see if I have my US dollars here, estimated charge. I don't see where I can add the actual chargeable quantity. Okay, perfect. So you can also play around with the columns here too. Okay, rate amount. So basically here's where I would be adding my rate amount. So here's where I can add the price, the actual charge. Here I'm gonna add 50 for package, and maybe here I can add 75. Okay, again, you're calculating this as a rate amount, so you're multiplying this price by the gross volume, which is giving you quite a large amount. Remember to change that and to ignore the calculation. If all you want to do is set the actual price, you can go to ignore calculation and ignore it for each one of the materials, and basically it's going to show you $185 here, as we see at the top. Okay, let's say that that's fine with us. We click on save. We get a message that it was saved successfully. We go back to our document. We refresh. And now you see we don't have the column that shows us the calculation rate, but we want to see it. So what I did, and just as a reminder, I clicked on the icon here for open dialog settings, and I looked for something that was related to charges or net price. there's something that would give me the amount, right? So we see net amount in document currency. It's a hidden column. We can always push it over here. We click on OK, and now we should have 180 something, no, which was the amount. Here you go. So now we know the amount in document currency for that specific freight order as well. So now we definitely have everything done completely. So our tasks as TS08 from issuing plant and receiving plant are complete. We've made all the changes, we've assigned the carrier, we've changed the locations, the dates, and we've added the actual charges. So our task is done. Now we push back to the TS07, and they would be responsible for submitting events. And we'll do that tomorrow. Okay, so I haven't seen any more questions in the chat. If you don't have any, let me know. I'm gonna stay on for another 3 minutes, and maybe we can test something else. If not, we can call it a day. Okay, remember tomorrow we have the managing events session and an extra hour after that session to go through any questions you may have. Okay, but you don't have any questions today, so I hope tomorrow is a different story. Okay, we have another 2-3 minutes. I'm gonna hold on and wait for anyone to ask a question if you have any. Okay, well, thank you, Fanus. Thank you, Riyad, as well. Stella, I'm glad you think it was cool. Okay. Thank you guys for being active participants. I always prefer that my students interrupt me and have questions. Okay, Jamil, tell me, what's the question? If you want to speak up, unmute yourself.
Brian, can you hear me?
Yes, Jamil.
Okay. Actually, maybe it's a challenging question, but maybe it will help the other colleagues with, make a wider picture of how TM interacts. If we have a scenario that we need to update the inbound delivery after we planned, okay, and there is no still any events and it's still open for execution. If we go back to ECC and updated the inbound delivery, okay, will it be updating all the plan based on the new delivery date? And if we can see how this will impact in TM on different levels, I mean, the FU and the FOs.
Okay, so great question, Jamil. Once you have planned, if you have already planned and you have freight orders, you changing things in the inbound won't have an impact because you already planned, right? Actually, I haven't tested that to see what the message would give me, but the process would be to first delete the FOs that were planned and then change the inbound delivery document. And as you even said yesterday, I think, right? Changing that would automatically change your DTR and freight unit.
Exactly.
But you would have to delete the planned freight orders.
Yeah. Will that impact the FOs? That's my question. Because I've tried to do it, and in ECC, the message was in yellow. So
yes, but the FOs were already planned. But you didn't see any change in the FOs. It just gave you a yellow warning to say that it was planned already.
Exactly.
Okay, but you didn't see that the FOs changed, right,
Mm.
in dates.
Well, actually, I didn't reach to that one because I didn't save the inbound.
Okay, well, I can test it to tell you exactly what happens, but that the process is not the correct one, right? Once you
Oh,
have already planned, you shouldn't make changes to the inbound. You have to get rid of the FOs first.
okay. Okay, great.
All right.
Thank-
Okay,
Thanks.
Jamil, but I can do some testing myself later on and tell you exactly what happens. Okay. And
Okay,
maybe
great.
I can bring that up tomorrow.
Mhm.
Ryan,
All right, Jamil. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, Fanus.
yes, we have a discussion today with Jamil also. We face some issue in Office about the packing because they are trying to do the good receipts, the RNI. So we have some issues with packing some of the POs. Stella and me, we changed the packing list in the inbound, and it was reflected also in the FO. On the SOW was reflected immediately after when we correct the packing. It was reflected in
Okay.
the SOW, which was planned but not managed yet.
Okay, so you didn't change any dates, right, or locations. You
No,
just
no,
basically
only
changed
only
packing
the
details.
packing. Yes, because we changed the packing details. Yes, because it was incorrect. We put incorrect, let's say, the description of the material packing.
Okay, well, that's good news, right?
Yeah.
I take that as good news that the system allows you to do that. Basically, since you're changing packing, in a sense, it's not affecting planning, right? It's affecting the items. So I understand the system allows you to do that. And I'm actually very glad to see that it reflects in the SOW, even though it's been planned already. So
Correct.
if this system changes in the long run and you can change the inbound and it affects even the FOs afterwards, that's very good, but I doubt it's going to be impacted when you change the dates, right? I think the dates is what's critical. As long as you don't change dates in the inbound, it won't affect the FOs. But if you change packing details, it's fine. It makes sense that it should change the packing details in the SOW too. Because eventually, at this point, you haven't done anything in terms of cost, right? You're not affecting the plan either because all you're doing is planning transportation of freight units. So really the details of the packing for now, unless of course, you know, when I'm thinking when TM gets a little more mature as a system, when you're doing the freight unit consolidation, right? When you're starting to combine freight units,
Mm-hmm.
if the packaging details change, eventually, let's say you made a major mistake in terms of volume and dimensions to a point where you can't combine two things together, but you have and you planned, and then you make changes to the packaging and it's completely off, then it should have an impact in the planning as well, because that means that you can't transport the two freight units together anymore. So maybe for now the system is allowing you to do that because you haven't, it's only one freight unit, right? You weren't combining
It was
different freight
two.
units?
It was two. There is was
It was
two
two.
freight. Yeah, two freight units combining together, but it's a small. Maybe we didn't change. We put the same, let's say, packing, but to avoid the symbols. You remember?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Okay,
from
so
yeah.
what happened? You had selected symbols first and then switched them to correct packaging materials,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes. And I will see also with RNI if is this reflect to the ECC when he's trying to do the actual cut receipt. I will check with my colleague of RNI to see if was this the is the mistake. I will let you know if
Okay,
has
yeah.
impact.
Let
Maybe it's
me know
another issue
definitely
with that.
because this is a very interesting case because all you did was you used the same packaging, but you used the correct version of the material, but it didn't really drastically change, right? The volume and dimensions of the goods you're transporting. So in a sense, it didn't affect the FUs because it's still the same dimensions, just the correct packaging.
Yes, yes, correct.
That's why I think the system simply took the change and went through normally. But I'm thinking that if the dimensions change completely, the system should not allow you to change the packaging details if you have already planned. Because let's say you combine 6 different freight units, and now instead of one container, there's 3 containers. There may be an issue there. So I'm thinking the system is allowing you to do that just
We
because
lost you.
it's the same dimension. Oh, sorry. I'm back. Fanos? Fanos, do you hear me now?
Now, yes.
Okay, I'm back. All right. So basically what I was saying is that I think that the system accepted that, even though it's an interesting scenario, and I'm going to bring this one up too. It only allowed you to do that because there wasn't a major change in the dimensions and volumes. That's what I'm guessing in this scenario. But still, once you have already planned your freight orders, changes into dates shouldn't be possible in the inbound because that is definitely affecting your planning. But changes in packaging details, it's interesting to see if, okay, I'm not sure why. It may be a connection issue.
We hear you, it's okay.
Oh, okay. So I think that was the voice of Sasha. So I think that's the reason. But nonetheless, I'm going to check that. I'm going to see if packaging details can be changed even after planning has done, or not, or if it's only a specific scenario because the material selected.
I have a live case, we can test it now, and I have another question to, actually not to you, but to other colleagues to see if they have experienced something that we need to consider as well.
Sure. Sasha.
Yeah, my question is, okay, I did these changes in packaging, it didn't affect anything, so it was just amending whatever, planning was there already. But the question is, we still need to update inbound delivery for FCAX Works FOB with the actual GR date, which means actual moment when the goods are handed over to the freight forwarder. So this will allow virtual good receipt and then, of course, shipment to proceed. My question is, did anybody tested what happens with the dates in TM after you enter actual GR date? And I have a case, we can test it now if nobody tested, but I thought maybe somebody already had experienced this. No, obviously not.
Okay.
So
I don't think anyone did. So yeah, why not? Let's take a look at that.
But I'm not able to share my screen, Brian. That's either you give me control and I log in there. And
okay, so let's see if I can.
Or you can put me as presenter maybe.
Yeah, so I'm just stopping my screen sharing myself and see if I can share this with you. Let me look for you and see if I can make you a presenter. The only thing is, I believe that I made myself the only presenter because we were having issues other times with people sharing their screen. There you go, make presenter. So here, now you're the presenter.
Okay, let me see. Yes, perfect. Okay, so let me see. I will share this screen. Tell me if you see it, please, because I...
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this is the inbound delivery, which is X-Work inbound delivery, and the actual GR date is missing. Basically, this would be the moment when vendor provide goods to the freight forwarder. So this action is still obligatory in the system. Transport management is a part of it, so we still need to do changes in the actual date of GR to allow for the virtual good receipt. So I'm just gonna see if I have, okay, so here is my, okay, this is the freight order. This is, Brian, we discussed this, this needs still clarification how we can remove it. But yes. In theory, I will go to the Fleischhacker. Let me see, the first one is this one. So this is the first freight order. And we can check, it says 16 December and planned on 16 December from factory from vendor to factory. So basically this planned arrival date would be the actual time when the goods are ready for the freight forwarder. So I will go to the second one, which is actually the freight itself from this one. So this one should not be possible to start unless goods are already delivered and ready for pickup. And this is my inbound here. This is the goods vendor. So if I would add now, let's say today is 18/12/2009, I'm adding actual GR date. I'm not going to add documents, I will just save it. Okay, so now, let me see if I can refresh. Actual GR date is 18/12. So no planning can, planning can start, but no delivery can start before that date. And it would be something that should be reflected here. And it's good time to test. I don't know if it's going to take time, but it is impossible that this will start on 16 because goods are still not there. And I don't know if it's going to take a bit of time or not. So let me see the...
I don't think it's going to make a change in TM directly, but when you edit the FOs, you can just manually change the date.
Yeah, and that's what I was mentioning yesterday. I think some configuration here is not really well done because I don't think those dates, at least now, they should reflect. Because if you tell a vendor and you have this plan and you awarded a PO, they can go 2 days earlier and pick it up, but it's not there yet, unfortunately. So there is some confusion that is gonna that this will create because goods are only available today. Because this date, you see, even this date, okay, this one is changed, but I think there is some issue with inbound delivery. Let me see if there is something that is not. Maybe this one. I was mentioning yesterday that inbound delivery pick up the creation date. I think not the. So this is what 2/2. Okay. So let's see. You see here. This is what I was telling you yesterday, and I think this is wrong. The delivery date in the inbound is 31st, creation date is 13 December, 31st of March. If I look at the okay, general trading, this is the first one. The system planned departure already on 13.
Yeah.
But it cannot be because the goods are only ready to start to depart on 31st of March. So the whole planning here, every dates in the TM is basically picking up the wrong date in inbound delivery. And this is why
picking up the creation dates.
The creation date. So the last leg here, if you look at this one, Dubai, Salerno, Pros, Brindisi. You see in the plan, it's still 13, planned arrival date 13 December. And actually planned arrival date for this would be probably in June because 31st of March is FCA date. So it's not gonna be really, I don't know, this is what we need to check.
Yeah, definitely that needs to be looked at because when you're planning, if this is an FCA scenario, right, if you plan the other freight orders, the loading and unloading locations, the dates were correct or they were also the 13th when you were in the transportation cockpit?
No, they were 13, everything, whatever you create.
Yeah.
if I because now I cannot change the creation date because it's the first date, so I can't really change it. But if I will delete this one and create a new one, it will pick up again the new document date, which would be today, regardless of promised delivery. And then this is the only actually date that is valid, because all of this one is just a promise. This one is actually when the goods are ready for pickup from the FCA location. So this should be this date must impact the planning, because then vendor, the freight forwarder, is aware that the goods are already there and they can be picked up. Otherwise, there is no point of having these dates, because we are talking two different vendors here, and the coordination between them. The only thing I can think is, if the events are managed properly, then okay, the freight forwarder will have the information, but.
Yeah, the events have to be managed properly. The actuals have to be managed properly. But I think also what I'm seeing on your screen, I think it's what Jamil's comment he made, that he changed the inbound dates and it didn't impact the FOs. I think it's because the FOs are only taking the dates of the creation and not the actual delivery dates. Yeah,
can change whatever.
That's why it doesn't impact them.
This date is nowhere to find in the whatever yeah. Maybe I can just you remember, we were, if there is time, I was showing, this was the interesting one that I had, packing, 2015151478. This inbound delivery, if you look at the packing, has a lot of what is it? I don't know, 60 maybe 60 handling units. So basically, there was this issue that you can really pack multiple units at once. It's not gonna be happening always, but I had like 42 containers, and this is another problem that we're going to have when we are buying containers. You cannot really pack them in a wrap or something. So this is like multi-packing, and all of these other items would go into these containers. So instead of creating handling units for each one, you can actually create automatically all 42. I can delete this just to show. Let me see if I can delete all of them. I'm not gonna save it. So I have 42 containers, and I would need to do one by one. But if I said I want to pack one container in packaging material, let's see, container, we can use anything. Let's see, container. There are different. So I will select a container and I will pack in container. So if I want to pack total 42 quantities, where one is in each handling unit, there is this option here, and this will automatically create 42 handling units with one each.
Nice.
So there is also this option here, but I think I don't want to confuse people. But this is something we need to explore, because we need to. And then, for example, I want to pack this 490. I want to pack 10 of each in the handling units. So I would need to select all. And again, if I do that, it should pack 10 of each in each of these units. So it's just something that.
And these are the ones you previously created, right? So you have some things packed, one in each, and then 10 in each.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm not gonna save this because it's I don't want to destroy it. Let me just double check if it's
This is real stuff. Okay.
it's just pack material. Yeah, so you see the some are already different because they have other things packed, but some work is needed. We need to practice on this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And thank you very much, Sasha, for showing us this. It's definitely very useful.
Yeah, but just this on the actual date, people, please pay attention when you are doing actual date. Check if it's changing, because if it's not, we might need to report something and discuss this with New Year, because I think it's important actually. Maybe it's a normal, maybe they have an explanation, but right now we don't have it.
Okay. Very good, Sasha. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me
Okay, so we'll
stop this sharing. Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you guys. So, okay, let's call it a day, and we'll meet tomorrow, and we'll go through another Q&A. And Sasha, you're more than welcome tomorrow to intervene if you have more examples, and the same goes out to the rest of you. Okay, so thank you guys, and see you guys tomorrow.
Yeah, I think tomorrow I would like to answer procurement related questions if there are. Shopping cart procurement. Maybe TM is yours. Sorry.
Okay, well, I'll do the session. I'll do the session on event management, and then with the hour that we have for Q&A, we'll see. Because if no one participates, we can go your way.
Yeah, I need to go and see Secretary General now. Sorry. Ciao.
Okay, ciao.